Hello, Dr. Robyne Hanley-Dafoe. How's it going?
Today, today is a lovely day. Today is a lovely day. I'm excited to be here with you, Peter.
I'm excited to be with you as well. This feels like the longest gap that we've had since recording, which is only about like 10 days or something like that. And yet, I felt the void in my life of like, oh, I haven't had this kind of connection with Robin in that period of time. So, you know how with some friendships, you're thinking about somebody and you end up texting each other on the same day, even though you haven't talked in 2 months. There's like this sense of like, oh, we're overdue. And so as I was logging into this call, I was like, oh, I'm overdue for some time with Robin.
Oh, Peter, that's so kind. And I missed our conversations last week as well, and so I'm happy to be here. And I do want to share with you. I this morning I had a lovely little moment of Peter. I was listening to our podcast that drops on Tuesday, and it came up in my queue in my podcast as I was walking the dogs this morning, and Peter, the episode that was aired today that I heard was about the favorite food that like elicits this memory. And Peter, you shared this just such this soul filled reflection about your experience with your apple pie throughout your childhood and your adolescenthood. And at one point I had tears. I was crying because it was just your vulnerability and your share, Peter, was so powerful. And I was walking on this path, and again, it's very early in the morning, and I just like stopped and I like just closed my eyes to just be like, wow, this is really special that we get to have these chats, and just thinking about the chats and how other people can, I hope, benefit from it. And I had this moment where I was holding space, holding you in my thoughts. And all of a sudden, the next thing I knew, I was like on the ground being dragged, and I was spitting out mud because Apollo saw a bunny. And at that very moment, he decided he wanted to go, go after the bunny. So as you were describing how to and all I heard in my ears was, yeah, you just need to make an apple pie vegan with the butter switch. I'm literally like spitting out mud on the side of the path and just being like, well, I held it for a moment. I had a moment, Peter. It was a moment
Right.
of like stillness and just reflection. But then Apollo had different plans, and of course, I love that the other dog stayed back to be like, "Whoa, are you okay, Mama?" But meanwhile, Apollo was long gone, and like, well, Peter, I had it for a moment, and I wanted to share that with you because it was awesome, and it just feels like, of course, this is my life. Like, I love this about my life, that it can go from that kind of calm to chaos in a flip of a moment. And I'm okay in both of those places.
Well, I don't want to get too technical on you, Robin, but in the business, we call that going from a moment of Peter, which is known as a mop, to a moment of Bunny, which is known as a mob. So you went from mop to
Nice.
mob. Which ironically sometimes requires that you need a mop again to mop up the mud on you. So there you go. Well, and now that I know your dogs well, and you and I did spend a day together doing designing a course that we're working on together, and so I got to know your dogs quite well. I fell deeply in love with them, and I certainly can picture Apollo with a determined mind pursuing that bunny. So
Yes. Yeah.
I love that.
Oh, yes. It was a full moment. It was a full moment, but it was special. So thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that then. And thank you for all of the other conversations that we've had and get to have together. It means a lot to me.
My pleasure. Well, I'd love to know, just to continue our very inconsistent feature of our episodes here, tradition, but I'm remembering today, Robin, where are we catching you in time?
Oh, Peter, so today I am still enjoying being home. So I'm still home, getting ready. Next week is when the road work picks back up. But this week I get to be home, and it's a very special, busy, full time with celebrating all three of our kiddos' birthdays who happen to fall in this particular season, two on the 24th and one on the 31st of March. So I'm home to be with my family.
That's amazing. Well, I now can really visualize your home, having spent some nice time there, and it's a beautiful place to be. And I feel grateful that you get to be there.
Thank you.
And I'm joining you from my little secret retreat in the woods by the water here. That I feel so fortunate to have come into my life. It's going to be 1 year in about a month, so it's hard to believe that a month has gone
Wow.
by. But yeah, I'm in just one of my favorite places on earth, and I don't know that I've talked that much about this place specifically. I think there's a part of me that's felt a bit sheepish about it or something, to have like a second place to live when I think that some people don't have any place to live. So I sort of, I kind of talk about it with some reluctance sometimes. And I do feel so grateful that I have this spot. And it's so, I feel like when I come here, I am channeling my grandfather, and we had a family cottage for 38 years that my grandfather built, and it was truly my favorite place on earth, and it was the saddest day of my life when they sold it. And so I was on a 17-year mission to find a spot that felt just like that, and I pulled it off. And so I'm in a good place every time I'm here. And I spent the weekend drawing drawings on napkins of the shelves that I wanted to build. And then I went to the hardware store and bought all the lumber. And I just was creating these shelves and fixing the place up. And I feel like I didn't need sleep. I didn't need food. I didn't need water. Like I could not have been happier doing that. So that's where I'm at right now.
Peter, I think there's so many threads that I would love to pull on where you are and your experience getting there.
Mm,
And first of all, thank you for sharing a little bit about a very special place that you have and you're able to be, where you're able to find time to be. I think
mm,
it's interesting that piece about so often, I think when we have privilege and abundance, often we get into this place of like not wanting to, like not even knowing really how to talk about it, not wanting to offend anybody. And I find that just such a kind of an interesting pull where it's the
mm,
same as, when you're, you do have, for example, work and you are successful in what you're doing, it feels as though like we can't say like, oh, we're tired or we're overwhelmed because we're thankful
mm,
to have the work and we're thankful to be working. We ought not to complain or be perceived as ungrateful if we're not living every moment and appreciating every moment. And I often kind of wonder where that lies in terms of that dual truth, where we can have a very grateful heart and we're also
mm,
human and we can like nice things. And that doesn't take away from our appreciation and our gratitude, nor does it take away from our awareness of social injustices and the idea that there are still a lot of systems that are really fractured. And it
mm,
also kind of reminds me of this idea of it almost seems like it adds a layer of almost like a little bit of like shame, because like, it's like, oh, well, we don't want to come across as not being grateful, or we have too many of these nice things. And what does that say about us? And again, I
mm,
just think that's so interesting because I see that so often with the people who, they just don't want to offend anyone and they don't want to, be perceived as ungrateful. And sometimes I feel like it makes us feel like there's something where we did something wrong. Where on the flip
mm.
side, I think we've done a lot of things right, to be able to do it with the hard work, with the right intentions, to be able to experience some of these opportunities and privilege.
Wow. I really, I appreciate the thread that you're pulling on, and it's the word was in my brain before you said it, that this idea of shame, and it's like we have an amazing ability to like find shame in all kinds of ways, right? Like I also spent more than 15 years having no money at all, and feeling a lot of shame around that, and I lived I lived in a neighborhood that was a nice neighborhood, and my ex-wife's parents owned the house, and we rented it from them, and so I had neighbors that had quote unquote real jobs, and we'd lean over the fence and they would talk about their vacations or whatever, and then I would be like, "Ugh," like or like an activity would be planned, and I'd be like, oh, I can't actually afford to do that, or those kind of things. So I lived with that shame, and then obviously there's the reverse. And as my speaking work and these kind of things started working, then I was able to do things like get this place, and then there's the shame is still there. The interesting through line that I see in it is that in all instances there's this impulse towards being like disingenuous, or I'm not being hard on myself, but I sort of correlate that to this idea, and I forget whether I came up with this or whether somebody said it, but the idea that when it comes to like humility versus arrogance, and that being sort of overly humble and sort of self-effacing and is just as disingenuous as being overly arrogant or cocky or whatever it is, and that in both instances the truth of who we are is the thing that we're not willing to share. We're not willing to step into our greatness, or we're compensating for our insecurities, or same thing as where I'm ashamed of the moments where I can't keep up with the neighbors, and then now I feel this like embarrassment that I have a second place to live. Yeah. So but all of it is like, am I willing to just show up truthfully?
Mm-hmm. Oh, Peter, that's so powerful. That idea of showing up truthfully, and this idea of overcorrection, where so the shame is present in both sides, and it's this idea of that overcorrection one way or the other is actually still pulling us away from the truth. And I just really appreciate these are. It's interesting. We often talk about like what topics are difficult to talk about in my writing and my research. We talk about like difficult conversations. And what's interesting is, I think there's those given things where people are like, oh, don't talk about politics, don't talk about religion, don't talk about, certain things. And I think there are these other topics like finances, like resources, like what we're talking about here. Those are actually wildly under talked about in our culture and in general conversation. And, a very, very dear friend, one of my best friend humans on the planet, Jillian out west, she's a financial planner. And she often talks about the fact that like by us not talking about money, we're actually doing a greater disservice to the next generation, because, there are all these like money stories that we carry. And she talks about it appreciably better than I can explain it here, but just that those behaviors impact our every single day life. Like understanding the finances and our relationship with money, that's part of our wellness. And if we're not talking about it in honest ways, having the right supports to be able to explore these big ideas, we're like missing a component to our holistic approach to wellness. And again, I just think it's interesting what we talk about and what we don't talk about. And I think it would benefit a lot of us if we could, again, show up in our truth in a way that, again, obviously mindful of all the parameters around us, but also be willing to have some of these conversations to say, where do we put this shame? How do we work through this? Because shame isn't a very good teacher. It doesn't change our behavior. It just holds us back from our potential.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And the thing that kind of emerged for me as you're sort of, you and your friend sort of proposing that this become more part of our dialogue, is also like, I think, like well, a couple of things. So one, I also think about the people that I'm now able to employ, and
Mm-hmm.
like the quote that came to mind for me was also like the Marianne Williamson quote, which I know I've quoted many times before, is this idea of like our deepest fear is not that we're inadequate, but that we're powerful beyond measure. And I really, that we can actually achieve our dreams, that we can accomplish these things, that we can step into all of these things that we wish for. And certainly in the moments in my life where I didn't have the money, I certainly longed for the moment where I did. And now, I'm able to employ people and
Mm-hmm.
do a lot of things that I wasn't able to do. And there's also all the demons, and there's all the fear of it all going away,
Yeah.
and the ever elusive sense of enough or safety or whatever that might be.
Mm-hmm.
I just appreciate being able to talk about it. I'm almost like watching myself from the outside, having this conversation with you, realizing that there's a red button that's flashing record, and I'm saying all this stuff out loud.
Yeah.
Um, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel, I feel like this is a worthy topic and a worthy conversation, and such an obstacle sometimes to our success. And like, I know for me, the idea of worthiness, of like, oh, can I act, is my time worth that much an hour? Like, I can't believe that. And what am I going to say? and
Yeah.
and there's probably somebody smarter than me or better than me or whatever who should probably get paid that and not me. And all of these things. And I think, like, what an amazing opportunity for all of that stuff to come up, and be like, okay, I think if I can kind of get at the root of that, then there's a real opportunity for me here to do some really great work.
Yeah, Peter, that's beautiful. And that's, I think, what it's all about is, excuse me, but finding our, our skills and our talents and our gifts, and figuring
Mm,
out how do we best use these to serve. And
mm,
if that is something that you're able to find and you're able to procure employment doing that, like, I really think that's the big idea, that we're
mm,
able to find ways to use our skills and our talents and our gifts. And I think everyone has such this beautiful constellation of what theirs looks like when you put those three together, of their
mm,
skills and their talents and their gifts, and finding ways to share it. And I think it's hard to ever, I think, like, measure impact. Like, we
mm,
can't measure loss of potential if we didn't
mm,
use our gifts and our skills and our talents. So I think it's quite fascinating. And what is coming up for me, there's 2 points. The first, Peter, is, I think, just like the general level of like discomfort about
mm,
talking about any topic in itself is actually really useful data, because
mm,
that means it's full of landmines, and it's full
mm,
of like parts where we're scared, or there's parts that we don't know about things. We don't want it to get misperceived. So anytime you're talking about a topic and you notice there is this degree of discomfort, I just
mm,
think that's giving us data that there's more for us to learn. There's more for us to almost like have a wee bit of a reckoning with,
mm,
because there's some kind of old stories. There's something out of alignment if we still notice this discomfort, and there's work to be done there. So first, when I notice discomfort in my body when I'm talking about certain things, I look at
mm,
that not as a bad thing and I shouldn't talk about it. That's like,
mm,
whoa, I need to shine a light on this, because there's something that isn't fitting with where I am today. And there's something out of alignment, or something's not congruent. And so I appreciate the discomfort. So that's point number one. And the second point, to circle back on the quote that you shared, I so deeply resonate with this idea around why so many of us are scared of our own greatness. And again, I think there's this pressure around humility, and I definitely want to have a humble heart and be a servant in terms of how I can show up for persons. And one of the things that I'm scratching the surface on, or I just feel like I'm kind of tiptoeing around the fringe of that, Peter, is that like I wasn't afraid of my failure. I have no shame around the failures that I've
Mm,
experienced, but for some reason, I'm holding a lot of shame around this idea of greatness. And not to
mm,
suggest that I even am great in any life area other than being a mom. I know without a doubt I am a great parent and I'm a great ally for my children. And I have no problem embracing my greatness as a parent. Doesn't mean I
mm,
haven't screwed up, doesn't mean I haven't dropped the ball, but I've gone back to the table every single time to those children, even when it was hard. And that to
mm,
me is something that symbolizes that I am doing this well. But when
mm,
it comes professionally, there is a component of me that just gets really nervous around this idea of
mm.
being perceived as an expert on anything or very skilled or great at anything. And that tells me that there's still work for us to do, and me in particular to do there.
Thanks for that, Robin. And I've seen your mom skills in action, and they are top notch. And I've seen your
Thank you.
professionally in action, and it's equally awe
Thank you.
inspiring. I have two thoughts, Robin. One, I replaced the word landmine when you said it with hidden treasure in my brain. That enticed me
Oh, I like that.
to think about to think about it as like, oh, look at all the hidden treasure here. And then the other thing, an inquiry or question that I have is, let's say somebody out there is listening and they're like, okay, I'm resonating with this. I would like to talk about money more or talk about some of these topics that feel like they've got a lot of hidden treasures. What
Hidden treasures.
might
I love that.
what might sort of step one be? What might the container look like, or what might a step one look like for somebody who wants to wade into those waters?
Oh, Peter, I love how you reframed hidden treasure. Just so you know, given that I use landmines often, I love how you just flipped it and now it sounds exciting versus dangerous. So I
Mm,
appreciate that, Sharon. It reminds me of another reframe that still permeates every single time somebody says it and I hear it out in the world. I now mentally do that correction like Peter would do, which was when you shared with me that I think I said kill two birds with one stone, and
mm,
you reframed it and said feed birds off, like feed two birds with one hand.
yeah.
And I was remembered now. I hear it every time. So you're just so you know, that's another deep learning moment for me where I'm shifting
Well,
landmines to hidden treasure.
credit to my friend Colin for that one. Hidden Treasure is a PK original,
Okay.
but Feeding Two Birds with One Hand, my friend
Okay.
Colin loved. That's his.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Colin, for sharing that, and thank
Thanks,
you,
good.
PK, reference that for the landmines to hidden treasure. And I think what I really encourage people to do is just like even just as a starting point, regardless of what the topic is, simply just have that moment of just really appreciation that you have this now within your awareness. Because I think
Mm,
so many things are so deeply buried, whether it be in our psyche or they're just not near top of mind. And whenever you come upon this new idea that you need to explore, or you have that increase in awareness, simply just noticing it and just be like, wow, now I'm actually in a place where this can come to the foreground, where this can come top of mind. So that in itself is a win. Because so often what we spend so much time in therapy doing is like trying to find those hidden treasures versus now you're actually there. You're at this moment of awareness and discovery. That's step number
mm,
one. My second kind of invitation, Peter, when before anyone kind of gets into doing the work, and so often we want to go to solutions quickly. We have this
mm,
urgency not to have things left open ended. We want resolution. We want closure. We want to know what this is. We don't like having things kind of still outstanding. Is actually to hold space, to give yourself time to just get familiar with what you do know about this. And there's lots
mm,
of ways to do that. One of the ones I think is really powerful is the free flow writing, where literally on a
mm,
post-it note, the back of an envelope, it doesn't need to be pretty. Just like what are all the things that you know about this to be true? So using the finance example, like, what is your money story? What is it that you were taught when you were a kid about money? How is money talked about in your household? What are your fears around money? And like literally just write as much as you can to essentially make the invisible visible. And so often when we're doing active discovery, the goal is to make the invisible visible. And then when you can see it, you're going to start to get some clarity. And then my hope for that person, including ourselves as we do this work in our own lives, is then finding that trusted ally. Because people know a lot about a lot of things, and finding that person, whether it be a financial behaviorist like Jillian Carr out in St. Albert, Alberta, or someone else in your community who knows a lot about this, and like seek that wise counsel like you talked about in our last episode, knowing who to ask questions to. And I think that's a beautiful entry point, noticing it, exploring it, but also even just appreciating that it's now something that's top of mind for us.
I love that, Robyne. And it's kind of amazing to me, the parallels between what you just described and the creative process. And, I've never thought of it this way, but like when you're writing a song, something that doesn't exist yet, right? You're making the invisible visible. And one of my favorite exercises, and this is the exercise I asked you to do when I was writing Calm Within the Storm for your book, was to do that free writing. And to, the rule that I always say to people is like, you just write, and you literally are not allowed to think about grammar or syntax or sentence structure or like anything at all. The idea is just to write. And even if you write the word banana 500 times, you continue writing. And I always say, just when you think you're done, write a little more. Because often there's that resistance, whether that's the Stephen Pressfield War of Art. He talks about the resistance that we all face, which is like, I should just go make a sandwich right now. And that's where you want to like not go make the sandwich and you want to stick with it. But there's such a parallel between that and our own personal work, right? That processing that we all get to do. So I never made that connection, but I love that, making the invisible visible. Robyne, I'm mindful. I want to get to the solution of always running out of time when it comes to our questions. And we only have 3 minutes left here officially. So I'm going to jump to solution and say maybe we should ask each other our questions. Unless you have any closing thoughts to wrap that part up.
Well, my last closing thought, just to put a wee bow on that, is, again, just to, whenever you're doing any form of discovery or unearthing or discovering these hidden treasures that you shared so beautifully, Peter, is to just meet yourself with like deep compassion, like deep kindness and compassion, that we are always doing the best we can with the tools and the information and the resources that we had at the time. And I think so often we can take that kind of look back and be like, oh, I should have, or I ought to. Just celebrate your here now. And there is absolutely nothing you can do to change your past. The past is unchangeable. So just meeting that, recognizing whatever got you here. And now you get to make the next right decision, whatever that might look like for you. So I just hope anytime people do inquiry and start to explore some of the unlearning that maybe they have to do in learning, they can meet it with just a lot of compassion and kindness. It will serve them, I think, a lot better, and it serves us all better when we meet ourselves in that place. So that's my closing note, if that's okay. And can I ask you a question in our short or window of questioning time?
Yeah. I feel like I have to add a closing note to your closing note. Not to have the last word, but
yes.
No,
please do. Have the last word. I would welcome it.
No. I just really appreciate that distinction. And because I'm so guilty of this, there's often such a forcefulness that I try to bring to that change. And I remember at the very beginning when I started working with my mindfulness coach, who I think I reference in every single episode.
I love it.
Thank you, Dr. Tammy Berger. I was like, okay, tell me what I got to do. I got to meditate. All right, can I do it? Like if I meditate 6 times today, is that going to get me there quicker? And she sort of like gently looked at me and she said, Peter, like here's like, make no mistake, doing this work is literally like killing off parts of yourself, like in a way, like, she said, like you are asking yourself to change parts of yourself, or to let go or release, if we use a more gentle word, parts of yourself that were created with great need and with plenty of reason as to why those parts developed. And so
Yes.
this process needs to be a slow, gentle, loving, caring one with the deepest compassion for yourself as you do this work. And so I think that note that you just gave at the end is probably the most important note of all. So I just wanted to underline that.
Oh. Thank you, Peter, for that. And I'm so glad you bring in so much of your lessons learned and your wisdom working with your mindful coach and doing this heart work. I appreciate that you bring this into these conversations, Peter. It's invaluable. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Robyne. All right, back over
Thank
to
you.
you. I'm willing to answer.
Back over to me for, okay, so here's here's the question I was curious about is, if Peter was to design like a day of rest and recovery, if you got the chance to design a day of rest and recovery, what would your day of rest and recovery look like?
God, I have such a physiological reaction to even just picturing that. Obviously, no alarm would be great. But I actually, I love when I get a long morning. And so I would have gone to bed early enough that I could wake up and maybe catch the sunrise, like, but not be like a sleepy sunrise, just be this like super present. I'm with the sun. Oh gosh, this is emotional, but like that I'm like with the sun as the day is breaking. I love that moment. I so rarely take it in, but that's such a special thing. So definitely like that moment, I think, just like some kind of connection with nature in a beautiful way in the morning. So beyond the sunrise, like a walk or a hike, I'm getting a memory of one of my favorite trips was I hiked the Grand Canyon. I actually hiked it a couple times, and like, for like 2 weeks in the canyon. And because of the heat, at like noon, you can't be hiking at noon. Like you have to do your hiking in the early hours. And so we would wake up at like 3 a.m, and pack up our stuff, and then we would hike for the first couple of hours with like headlamps on, and then we would find a spot. And every spot in the Grand Canyon is a perfect spot, right? Because it's an upside down mountain, so you have perpetual view. And we would cook breakfast and just watch the sun come up across the canyon, and it would just like just shoot these shadows and light, and it was just such a special thing. And then we would hike after this breakfast. So some kind of version of that. I'm only at breakfast, Robyne, and we're way over time here, but let me see if I can speed this up. So sunrise,
I love it.
connection with nature, like walking, something like that, like just being like just a spacious time where I don't have to be anywhere or do anything in particular like that. I would love to. My perfect relaxation day would involve a lot of time in the kitchen, like cooking a really luxurious recipe, like a recipe that's ridiculous to make in the middle of the week. So I think part of the morning would be spent probably lying on my daybed here and reading just a stack of cookbooks, and picking recipes, and just like and then just like cooking, being out in nature. Maybe the day would end with like just a few friends coming over and like cooking a beautiful meal for them and playing music, passing a guitar around, sharing songs, sharing stories. And yeah, just being surrounded by love and connection and nature and good food and zero set times anywhere, just flow.
Oh,
There you
Peter,
go.
thank you for walking us through that. And even just hearing it just brought this sense of like peace and stillness and just that spaciousness, where then all of a sudden our tanks have time to refill. We have time to replenish. We have time to then go out and continue to do the good work. That's a beautiful example of what a day of rest and recovery would look like. And I know that question is often asked, like, what would your perfect day be? And I feel like that in itself adds pressure. So my invitation for folks who are listening, and thank you for setting the example, Peter, of like, what would a day of rest and recovery? Because rest and recovery are different. Rest is that physiological decompression, and recovery is where things can actually start to heal and grow and like resynthesize. And so thank you for that. And my question for folks listening is, what would your day of rest and recovery look like? And if you want to like be really bold, look at your calendar and like say, this is going to be my day of rest and recovery, and guard it, plan it, schedule it. Those days don't happen by chance. They happen with good intention. So my hope is other folks are able to plan and schedule and bring their rest and recovery day into fruition in the very near future.
I love that invitation. And if you're listening, let's do this. Let's do this.
Yes.
Let's make it happen. And I say that very gently. Robin, what do you think? We're at 37 minutes here. Should I save my question for next time or do I? Yeah. Okay.
I think
we'll save it.
Unless
I
you
want
have
to give
like
you,
a rapid fire back.
I
Oh,
do
okay.
not have a rapid fire question, so I will save my question.
Okay.
I really want to know your answer to that question too. So I'm going to bookmark both questions for future episodes.
I love it.
Robin, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to connect with me and connect to people listening. It's always a gift to be in your presence.
Oh, Peter, well, thank you for your time, and to everyone who is listening. I'm just so glad we can all be here together. So thank you, and we'll talk to you soon.